Part 1. I'd been the woman of the house since I was 12, ever since Mom passed away. Dad tried his best to keep everything together. But with little Jack needing constant care and attention, I had to grow up fast. Real fast. While other girls my age were discovering makeup or daydreaming about their first kiss, I was figuring out how to stretch a grocery budget, fix a leaky faucet, and comfort my baby brother when he cried in the middle of the night. College? That was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not just financially, but in time. Every dream I had went on the back burner. I dove straight into work after high school, landing a job at a tiny ad agency downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and let me keep food on the table and Jack in school. He was the smart one, a real brainiac. I scrimped, saved, skipped everything from vacations to new clothes just to make sure he got through college. And he did, top of his class. He landed a job at some high-end trading company and rose through the ranks so fast it made my head spin. But tonight wasn't about Jack or bills or long work days. Tonight I was letting loose. My best friend Mia had practically dragged me to this fancy downtown party. She said I needed a break, and she wasn't wrong. I squeezed myself into a dress I hadn't worn since low-rise jeans were still in fashion, and tried my best to blend in with the crowd of sparkly, high-heeled strangers. Mia was already off chatting with a group of people, leaving me awkwardly clutching a drink by the wall. I scanned the room, half hoping for an excuse to leave early, when I saw him. Lucas. The man literally looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. Not just handsome, ridiculously handsome. But it wasn't just that. He laughed like he meant it. Big, hearty, eyes closed kind of laugh. The kind that made you want to know what was so funny. He caught me staring. Busted. But instead of turning away, he smiled and walked straight over. My heart did this weird flip. "Hi, I'm Lucas. I couldn't help but notice you from across the room," he said, his voice smooth but not forced. I blinked. Words got stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. I'm Jennifer. Jennifer Aniston." "Jennifer," he repeated, smiling. "Enjoying the party?" I chuckled awkwardly. "It's all right. Not really my usual scene. Too many suits and uncomfortable shoes." He laughed, a warm, rich sound. "I hear you. I'm about ready to ditch this tie." We talked, just talked. About jobs. He worked in software. About how these parties were all glitz and little substance. About how I got into advertising, not because I loved selling things, but because I liked telling stories. Before I knew it, he was offering his hand. "Want to dance? This place could use some shaking up." We danced to some bizarre electronic jazz fusion track. We started off awkward, but soon we found a rhythm, laughing the whole time. By the end of the song, I was breathless, in a good way. As the party started to wind down, Lucas leaned in close. "Can I see you again? Somewhere less sparkly?" I nodded before I even thought about it. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers. He flashed that killer smile one more time and disappeared into the night. Walking home under the glow of streetlights, the city unusually quiet around me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Maybe this really was the start of something new, and it was. Lucas and I became inseparable. It was wild how natural it felt, like we'd known each other forever. We didn't do fancy dinners or lavish dates. We grabbed tacos from food trucks, took long walks in the park, and had deep conversations on my old lumpy couch till 2 a.m. Lucas had a way of making everything seem interesting, even the most mundane parts of life. One chilly Saturday, he showed up at my door with that troublemaker grin. "Let's go for a drive." "Where to?" I asked, lacing up my oldest sneakers. "It's a surprise, trust me, you'll love it." We drove out of the city, buildings giving way to trees and rolling hills. About an hour later, we ended up at a scenic lookout point over the river. The sun was just setting, painting the sky in wild shades of orange and pink. Lucas laid out a blanket from his trunk, and we just sat there in silence, soaking it all in. Then he turned to me, his voice unusually serious. "Jennifer, these past few months have been the best of my life. You've made everything better. I can't imagine not having this, not having you." My breath caught. I felt the same way, but hearing it out loud made it real. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped. "Jennifer Aniston, will you marry me?" I stared at the ring, at his hopeful face. This wasn't the kind of life I thought I'd ever have. Sunset proposals and sparkly rings felt like things that happened to other people. Not to the girl who spent her teenage years figuring out how to cook dinner for a family of 3 on $10. But there he was, and it felt right. "Yes, Lucas, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger and pulled me into a hug. The world around us blurred like a scene from a romantic movie, except it wasn't fiction. It was real. It was ours. Or at least, that's what I thought. After we got back to my apartment that night, I could barely sit still. I was buzzing. The ring sparkled on my finger like something out of a fairy tale, and for once, I let myself believe that maybe things could turn out okay. The first person I called was Jack. My little brother, my partner in crime, the person who knew all my scars and stories. "Jack, you're not going to believe this," I said as soon as he picked up. What happened?" "Lucas proposed." I said yes. There was a pause, a beat of silence that stretched just long enough to make me nervous. Then Jack's voice came back, full of emotion. "Jen, are you serious? That's amazing. I'm so happy for you." "Thank you," I said, tears pricking my eyes. It feels good. Lucas is a good guy, I can tell. You two are going to be great together." His words settled over me like a warm blanket. Jack had always been my barometer for truth. If he was on board, I could breathe easier. But that high didn't last long. The following week, Lucas invited me to have dinner at his parents' house. It sounded innocent enough, just a casual family dinner. I figured it would be a chance to connect, to get to know the people who raised the man I was going to marry. It felt anything but casual. The moment we pulled up to their pristine, mansion-like home, my stomach twisted into knots. Everything about the house was intimidating. The perfectly trimmed hedges, the grand columns, the kind of driveway that curled like a ribbon. I suddenly became hyper-aware of every scuff on my shoes, every crease in my dress. Lucas rang the doorbell, and his mother answered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jennifer," she said in a tone that was somehow both warm and cold, "finally we meet." "Thank you for having me," I said, trying to ignore the nerves bubbling inside me. "Oh, please, call me Diane," she insisted, but her voice was stiff. Everything about her was stiff. Inside, the home looked like something out of a catalog. Polished marble floors, immaculate furniture, not a speck of dust or clutter in sight. I felt like I was tracking in mud just by existing. We moved to the living room where Lucas's father sat reading the paper. He looked up, gave me a once-over, and nodded. "So you're the one who stole my son's heart?" "I guess I am," I replied, forcing a smile. The evening unfolded with Diane steering the conversation like a courtroom interrogator. Her questions were sharp, and her tone was always just a touch too curious. "So Jennifer, tell us about your family," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "It's just me, my dad, and Jack," I said. "My mom passed when I was a kid." Her eyebrows lifted a fraction. "I see. And without a mother, how did you manage the finer aspects of becoming a lady?" The jab landed, but I stayed composed. "My dad did his best, and I figured out the rest." Diane murmured. Then, as if she hadn't already pushed enough, she added, "And Lucas tells me you didn't go to college?" "That's right," I said. "I went straight into work. I've built a career in advertising from the ground up." "Fascinating," she said, her smile thinning. "I just always imagined Lucas would end up with someone with a formal education." Each word felt like a needle. But I bit my tongue. I wasn't about to get into a battle over my worth at the dinner table. The meal that followed was beautiful, no doubt, perfectly plated, Michelin star quality, but it tasted like tension. Halfway through, Mr. Aldridge asked, "Is there perhaps another reason for this rushed engagement? You aren't expecting, are you?" I nearly dropped my fork. "No, absolutely not." The air was thick. Lucas stayed mostly quiet, occasionally trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, but his efforts landed flat. When we finally got out of there, I felt like I'd run a marathon. "They're a bit intense, huh?" Lucas said as we walked to the car. "That's one word for it," I muttered. But I wasn't ready to give up. Love isn't always easy, and maybe this was just a bump. I didn't realize then it was just the beginning. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Wedding planning, at least for most brides, was supposed to be exciting, joyful even. But for me, it was mostly stress with a side of emotional gymnastics, thanks to Diane. Every detail, every decision, every moment turned into a silent battle. From the flowers to the colors of the table napkins, she questioned everything. Nothing was ever quite up to her standard. One afternoon, Jack came over to help me with some planning. We were halfway through finalizing the seating chart when my phone rang. "Diane." I put her on speaker, bracing myself. Jennifer, darling, are you absolutely sure about these colors? Beige and ivory? It's all a bit dull, isn't it? We thought they were elegant, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Jack rolled his eyes dramatically. Here we go again, he mouthed. Darling, neutral is just another word for boring, Diane chimed, and I could practically see her shaking her head. And remember, this isn't just about you. Our family has a reputation to maintain. I sighed. What if we added a pop of color, maybe red napkins? The line went dead silent. Then, red? Absolutely not. Red is garish, Jennifer, completely out of the question. I hung up that day feeling drained. But just a week later, at a meeting with the venue coordinator, Diane burst into the room with a new idea. Red, that's it. Red napkins and red vases. It'll be iconic. I sat there stunned. She said it like it had been her idea all along. Later that night, I vented to Lucas. It's like she does it on purpose. Last week, red was tacky. Now it's her brilliant idea. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. She just wants everything to be perfect. Maybe let her have this one? I stared at him. Easier for who, Lucas, me or your mother? He didn't answer. And that silence was louder than any argument. The morning of the wedding came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the lace on my dress. It was everything I'd hoped it would be. Elegant, simple, timeless. Dad knocked gently. You ready, sweetheart? I nodded. As I'll ever be. We walked together through the venue, and my nerves calmed with every step he took beside me. But when we entered the hall, I caught sight of Diane. She was wearing black. A full black dress with a black veil, like she was in mourning. My heart dropped. Lucas stood at the altar, his eyes fixed forward. He didn't even notice. The ceremony began. I barely remember the words, but I remember my dad's grip on my hand as he gave me away. I remember Lucas smiling at me, and for a moment, I let myself feel happy. Then came the speeches. I went first. I thanked Dad. I thanked Jack. I even thanked Lucas's parents, trying to be gracious. But Diane stood up dramatically. Today is a day of mourning, she cried. I've lost my son to this woman. Gasps rippled through the guests. Lucas looked embarrassed but didn't speak. Then she pulled out papers. Due to the emotional stress this union has caused me, she said, I require compensation. $7,000 a month for 1 year to cover therapy and health expenses. She handed me a contract. I looked at Lucas, waiting for him to shut it down. He didn't. Jennifer, please, he said. It's just how things work in my family. Respect the rules. My legs felt weak. Before I could say anything, Jack stormed forward. He grabbed the contract and tossed it aside. Absolutely not, he shouted. My sister will not be humiliated like this. He turned to the crowd. Jennifer gave up everything for me. She worked so I could go to school. And today, I'm giving her an apartment and a trip around the world. The room burst into applause. Then another man stepped forward, Mr. Thompson, Jack's boss. I came here as a guest, but I've seen enough. Lucas, the job offer we extended to you, consider it rescinded. A man who can't stand up for the woman he loves doesn't belong in our company. Lucas paled. Diane shrieked. The guests whispered. Jack placed his arm around me. Come on, Jennifer, let's go. And just like that, I walked away. From the wedding, from Lucas, from that family. Not in tears, not in shame, but free. The apartment Jack gave me was more than just a place. It was a symbol of freedom. It sat on the edge of the city, modern yet cozy, with huge windows that let in the morning light, and a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a little herb garden I swore I'd never have time for. But now, I found myself watering basil and mint every other day. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was sitting on a plane. Not alone. Jack was on one side of me, Dad on the other. We were on the first leg of a world trip Jack had originally planned for my honeymoon, or rather, for the people who used to be my in-laws. He gifted it to us instead, said we needed the break more. We laughed a lot on that trip, ate too much, slept in and stayed up late, and as we explored bustling markets in Bangkok, strolled along ancient streets in Rome, and watched the sun melt into the ocean from a Bali beach, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. It was during a quiet afternoon in Thailand, on a stretch of sand where the only sound was waves licking the shore, that I met Alan. He was building a sandcastle with a little girl. She had curly dark hair and a serious look of concentration as she tried to balance a seashell on one of the towers. She looked up, noticed me watching, and toddled over with the shell in her hand. "This is pretty," I said, taking it from her. "Thank you." "I'm Mia," she said, then pointed. "That's my daddy." Alan walked up, smiling. He had kind eyes and a relaxed energy that made you want to talk to him. "Hope she's not bothering you," he said. "Not at all. She's got a great eye for shells." He chuckled. "She gets that from her mom, or maybe it's just in her DNA." There was a moment of pause, then he said, "I'm Alan, widower, traveling with Mia to see the world one beach at a time." I introduced myself, and somehow, just like that, we clicked. We saw each other again the next day, and the one after that. Our paths kept crossing, on a sunset cruise, at a cooking class, even waiting for a tuk-tuk. It felt natural, easy, like a rhythm we didn't have to force. We talked. About loss, about hope, about what came next. Alan told me how he lost his wife 2 years ago, how he'd been trying to figure out how to raise Mia with love, while also learning to breathe through the grief. And I told him about Lucas, about the non-wedding, about the contract and the dress, and the moment Jack stood up and refused to let me be disrespected. Alan didn't interrupt, he just listened. And that, more than anything, made me feel seen. One evening, as we sat side by side watching the horizon, he asked, "When this trip is over, would you want to see where this could go?" I looked at him. I looked at Mia, curled up asleep under a towel beside us. And I said yes. Not because I needed a happy ending, but because I realized this was a new beginning. The past would always be part of me. The girl who raised her brother, who held her family together, who stood at the altar and said nothing when her world unraveled. That girl was still inside me. But now, so was the woman who stood up and walked away, who built a life with her own 2 hands, who looked out at the ocean and saw endless possibilities. And that woman, she was just getting started.